Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online, and our newest co-sponsor Cardamajigs.com, presenting Cubamajigs. These durable, scratch-resistant plastic cases are perfect for cubes, sideboards, and more, with new designs every Monday. I'm Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
That's my villain laugh. We're doing a villain show.
Ruben Bressler.
I like it. That was good. I didn't realize what was happening, but then you're just smarter than all of us. I typically am, as you can notice, the right-hand man whenever I'm a villain. Like I'm the jerk, even more jerky sidekick who's like, and stay down, and then walks away. That's the role. That's the villain that I prefer to play.
Nice. Well, look, we also began with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 heroes. Ruben?
This one comes from Simon Adamson, who writes, the most overlooked hero on this list has got to be Eladamri, Lord of Leaves, one of the most tragic heroic characters and considered one of the most skilled tacticians of the coalition in the Phyrexia Dominarian War. He defended Skyshroud on Wrath, lost his daughter to the Phyrexians, led the decoy attack on Volrath's stronghold, traveled to Dominaria and united Keld, was considered the living manifestation of Freyalise's will on Dominaria by the Llanowar elves, and chose death by his own hand along with his lover Civi rather than succumbing to Yawgmoth's death cloud. And that is only the rough cliff notes of what Lord Eladamri accomplished. I can't say where he should fit on a numbered list, but if anyone deserves praise and fit the hero trope, it would be him.
Wow. So for those who don't know, that is a rare from Tempest. It's two green mana for a 2/2 legendary elf warrior. All elves have Forest Walk, which you don't know what that is anymore. That means that they can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls a forest, and other elves have Shroud.
Right.
So as a 2-mana 2/2 that gave your elves Forest Walk and Shroud, that was pretty cool. Particularly because, and they sort of eroded it where other elves have Shroud. Right. It doesn't give himself Shroud.
I just want to say, you all felt so strongly about our Heroes video. We had 42 comments within hours of this video going up. And I want to say that is unprecedented for us. So thank you all so much for showing out to a video and a topic that, we're not the strongest Warthoses out there, but we're certainly giving it a shot. So thank you.
Yeah, we ended up with over 50 comments on the Facebook. I received a direct message. Evan received a Slack message. This comment that won was from Facebook. We had Reddit comments this week. Just all over the place. So thanks for showing out for this one. And keep it up.
Yeah, yes. That was great because we're going to the other side of the spectrum this week with villains.
The darker side of the coin. Yeah.
So much darker. So darker, and so much darker, in fact, that I don't have half of the picks that everybody else does.
Right.
You're the hero.
You're the
hero. Read about that life.
Yeah.
Yep. All about it. So that'll be fun.
That Magic Mics deserves and needs.
Between number 8 and number 5, I'm just going to take a nap. It's going to be fun.
Okay.
Yeah. But so congratulations to Simon for winning that $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. Please give us a shout on Twitter if Aaron hasn't blocked you. Whisper on Twitch if she hasn't blocked you there.
It's really hard to block people on Twitch. But yeah, Reddit is good. Facebook is good. We are accessible so many ways, and I'm sure
Facebook is good. The winner this week did come from Facebook.
Yeah, so just hit me up there.
There you go. All right. So we're going to get into our top 10 villains. Now, what a villain is, much like what a hero is often subjective. So I can imagine we'll have a few interesting choices as we go through this list. I know I have a few hot takes, if you will, a few sizzling hot takes. But I also don't have a number 10. And Aaron, I believe you don't have one either.
I don't, but I do want to say that this list was so much fun to make, and I relate so much more to villains. Do you think I watch Batman the animated series because I care about Batman? No, I watch it for Two-Face. I watch it for Catwoman. I watch it for Scarface and the Mad Hatter. Do you think I watch Star Wars because I care about Rey? No, I watch it for Phasma. And so this list was right up my alley and probably one of the most difficult lists I've ever had to make.
It was pretty rough, but Ruben, that means you're the only person with a top 10. What is yours?
I'm the only one with
Were they number 10?
I've
Sorry.
also got the real top 10. But
Oh,
I guess
okay.
we're gonna fight about that later because I'm sure that some of the hires that Evan has are lumped in my top 10.
Spicy.
So we're gonna start my number 10 with a villain who is a planner-centric villain, just one plane, but really impacted the overall story of that plane. We're going to go to Ravnica, which is where we are right now in the Magic story and where we've been 3 times before. But the first time we went, we had a bad guy who basically unwound about 10,000 years of guild pact rule and law due to his machinations until Agaris Kos was able to put a stop to them. My number 10 is Zadek.
Ooh.
Zadek, his motives and his moves directly led to the destruction of the guild pact, which almost threw Ravnica back into all-out large-scale war between 10 factions. That was 10 millennia in the making. That was in the oven for 10,000 years. And so Zadek, who is the founder of House Demir, and is a vampire, attacked during the decamillennial celebration, the celebration of 10,000 years. And with the aid of a shapeshifter and Savra, who Aaron is a fan of, almost destroyed the guild pact entirely until such a point that Agaris Kos, the legendary Wojek veteran, was able to put a stop to it, although by his actions also dissolved the guild pact, and it gets a little hinky from there. But certainly Zadek's motives and moves, and the big thing for me is that you're a villain if you're trying to cause a ruckus, if your motives are evil, and Zadek certainly were.
Wow.
I think it also says something about your level of villainy where, you mentioned the twist where your imaginations are so deep that, people do things and don't even realize they're contributing to your plot. People feel like if I just do X, this all stops. And it's like, oh no, you doing X is what sets all this off. And I think that really says how good of a planner somebody is when, those fail safes are in place.
When they're unwitting participants, when they don't understand that you're doing exactly what they want you to do.
Yep, right.
And you're like, no, I had this idea myself. And you're like, no, you didn't. Yep. Zadek, Lord of Secrets, originally showed up in Ravnica City of Guilds. It's a 7-mana 5/5. 2 black, 2 blue, 3 generic mana for a 5/5. This was back when creatures still sucked, y'all. Just want you to know.
Right. Well, some of them did, yeah.
Some did. Well, I mean, it's in the Guilds of Ravnica guild kit for Demir.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty cool. That's its most recent printing. But as a 7-mana 5/5 flyer legendary vampire, if it deals combat damage to a player, instead you put that many +1/+1 counters on Zadek, and that player puts that many cards from the top of their library into their graveyard. It is the Mill Lord, as it were, and that's pretty sweet. Also, waiting 10,000 years to do something, that's a heck of a plan you got there. That's patience. I'm like 20 minutes for the microwave. Like, come on,
sitting on
let's
it.
go.
Yeah, exactly.
Got 5 minutes. Let's go. Okay, eat lunch. All right.
I'm looking at my watch, waiting for the coffee to brew.
Ruben's 5 minutes late, and we're like, come on, let's go.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We're like, Ruben, noon, right? Noon Eastern Standard, 9 a.m. He's like, yeah, noon.
Yeah, you can't wait 10,000 more years. Come on.
12:05. Hey, Rube. We're like, rebooting. Like, okay, it's fine. Good number 9.
Sometimes laptop potatoes. That's on brand.
There you go. All right. So, Aaron, what is your number 9?
I think some of the best villains are the ones where you can relate to them, where you see the things that they are doing and you think to yourself, I might do that too. Like if I were in that situation, I might react the same way because it doesn't make their actions seem so alien, seem so foreign. You start to understand, and that's a really terrifying thing for a lot of people to put yourself in that situation and to understand what someone is going through. My number 9 is Nahiri. So Nahiri, we first got a taste of with one of the commander sets. She was one of the original 3, along with Soren and Nissa, I believe, who enacted this plan to deal with the Eldrazi. And they knew that they needed to lure the Eldrazi to a very delicious plane. And so Nahiri volunteers her plane. So they lock them up in these hedrons. The plan seems to work. Eventually, the Eldrazi bust out. And when Nissa tries to, or I'm sorry, when Nahiri tries to tell Soren that this is happening, he's already on Innistrad. So he's got Avacyn, he's got the Hell Vault. He's not getting her messages, or so he says. Avacyn tries to Nahiri tracks him down. Avacyn intervenes and he shoves them both in the Hell Vault. 6,000 years go by. Thalia busts open the Hell Vault. These two come out. The first thing Nahiri does is she goes back to visit Zendikar and finds it in ruins. The Eldrazi are loose. Nobody stopped them. And so she decides she's going to get revenge on Soren, and the way that her world was destroyed, she will destroy his too. And so she launches this massive plan to like lure Emrakul to the realm, and she ends up destroying Markov Manor. And this was there was a lot of discussion around this character of, were her actions justified? You had somebody who she perceived to be her mentor who basically screwed her over. And can you see where she was coming from? Would you have felt the same way? There were also some discussions about some people didn't care for the fact that this was another sort of scorned woman trope of, was that the right thing to do? Is this something we've kind of seen before? But there were a lot of people who said, if that had happened to me and my world fell apart, I might do the same thing.
Yeah, Nahiri is one bad mofo when she's angry. She's ready to stick you in stone. Ready to call the biggest, baddest creature ever to come kill you and destroy everything that you know. Wow. Yeah, that's rough. It's not quite setting the clothes on fire out on the front porch or whatever, but it's close. It's really close.
Not far off from that.
No,
yeah. All right. So for my number 9 here, I went back to the world of the Weatherlight. There are a few villains in there that you can choose one. But this one came from a noble family. Had a bad relationship with his parents, but loved this angel named Selenia. And Selenia was bound to them via a very magical artifact. And he wanted, Selenia, to move past the friend zone, if you will, to move beyond the friend zone. She was like, thank you, next. I'm trying to get it with the kids here.
Right.
He was trying to keep it lit, fam. You understand?
Yeah.
And she was like, miss me with all that relationship.
Yeah.
And eventually he's like, screw it. I'm destroying this artifact. And then she ran off, and that made it worse. And he was cursed as he eventually killed her in a rage. Right?
Yeah.
And then he became a vampire at that point.
Yep. Took on the curse, yeah.
He took on the curse and was later an ascendant Evankar of Wrath. Krovax is just not the coolest, most easy dude to get along with. I like to think of the planar chaos version where everything went differently.
Everything went well.
And maybe the fam was lit at that point. And it was Krovax ascendant hero. Maybe he and Selenia, had a meet cute, if you will.
Selenia still dies in the Planar Chaos story, but he channels his rage into righteous fury for good in that.
Yeah, this is definitely, a little bit of a problematic storyline, but also the typical sort of fall from grace trope. You have somebody who, by all accounts, appeared to be, pretty wholesome, pretty innocent, and then just goes through this death spiral of, falling in love with the angel, destroying the very thing that he loves the most. And then it just kind of keeps going from there. He ends up being the Evankar, he ends up fighting Volrath and taking over. And so it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper until there's just absolutely no point of redemption.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, in the Planar Chaos version, apparently Miri killed Selenia and became cursed instead. That's where Miri the Cursed comes from. And following his grief for the loss of both of them, he reemerged as Krovax. And according to the artist for the new artwork, the plumed cape is related to Selenia's wings.
Aww.
Which is really cool.
Nice.
That's neat.
All right. So, Ruben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is, last week we talked about the Gatewatch and how they've come together to fight all of these big villains. But you never forget your first. The first villain that really brought all of these planeswalkers together to fight against a common enemy, the OG Gatewatch, the first villain was Ob Nixilis. And so that's my number 9.
My number 10.
Nice.
So we were right there. Ob Nixilis was a warlord, really, and a bit of a malcontent. And he's from a plane where there was only war and was cursed by demons to be the only survivor of that war. And eventually Sorry, go ahead.
Just to clarify a little bit. So what actually happened was he found a summoning chamber for a demon, sacrificed the rest of his men to that demon. The demon then sensed his desires and then killed everybody on the plane, leaving him.
Oh, wow.
So the demon's the one that did that.
Jeepers.
Yeah.
Well, that's an awkward way to start your existence as a powerful person of the Black Oath, as it were. But then later, sort of accidental, like was trying to get more power and more resources, triggered his spark, but lost it as a result of Zendikar's chaotic situation. Trapped himself on Zendikar, and Nahiri put a hedron in his forehead to make him lose his planeswalkerness. But then later, whenever a planeswalker would come to the plane, he would get all buddy-buddy with them. And eventually, a petulant child named Jace showed up and sort of allowed him an avenue back to power. Ob Nixilis's wings come back. There's a fight that happens where a lot of people died, where they were trying to build another Hedron network to trap Ulamog. But in the process, Ob Nixilis instead unleashes Kozilek from the other Hedron network, is defeating Nissa, and Gideon is having a big fight. Chandra finally shows up and is the champion of the story, and that is sort of how Gideon, Jace, Nissa, and Chandra all sort of got together to form the OG Gatewatch.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's kind of like the Wile E. Coyote of Magic in that he always has these schemes that never really go anywhere, and then he swears like he'll be back. And so, he gets his spark because he oversees, or he witnesses the destruction of his plane and realizes that this is kind of what he wants to do. And so he ascends, he becomes a planeswalker, he starts trying to conquer worlds. The Chain Veil is actually what turns him into a demon. So he's like, I'm going to use this Chain Veil. No, you're not. Then he goes to Zendikar, ends up with a hedron in his head, so that's not working. And then if I understand it correctly, they take the hedron out of his head and give it to Garrick, because Garrick had lost his mind. And so at that point, he starts consolidating power. He gets his spark back, and even that doesn't take off. So, he hasn't been too successful. I'm not really sure how much further you can go with the character, but for the times you need a black planeswalker and Liliana's on vacation, he's fine.
Did you know that he broke Jace's cheekbone? I didn't know that. This is very similar, I guess, to Jace losing the toe, and then later.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No.
Later with toe.
I just know the fact about the demon killing everyone on his plane. Like, genocide gets you on a list of villains. It just does.
I mean, so he broke his cheekbone, sent him sprawling. Before Nicholas could snap Jace's neck, Gideon showed up and shredded one of his wings. This is interesting. Despite being in pain, he was impressed by Gideon and offered to have a rematch on some other plane of Gideon's choice. Are you serious? This is like that weird, like, school ground, like, I'm going to come back here tomorrow, I'm going to kick your butt. That's pretty good, but I'll get you tomorrow. Like, what? Okay. Ob Nicholas is weird. Super cool about the hedron in the head thing. I think that's really unique and interesting. But anyway, all right. So let's move on to number 8. I'm not going to have one for a while. Hope you guys enjoyed my one entry. See ya on number 4. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is one of my patented cheat groups.
Oh no!
Because you're not going to put these folks separately. I don't understand how you could. Okay. So my number 8. Tell me how you would divide up Liliana's 4 demons: Gristlebrand, Kothafed, Belzenlock, and Razaketh. Did you have any of them individually on your list?
I did not know.
So gotta have them all together. These are the 4 demons that sort of locked Liliana into the Chain Veil kind of curse.
Gristlebrand, Razaketh.
Gristlebrand, Razaketh, Kothafed, and Belzenlock.
Although if you want to get technical, Nicol Bolas is the one who actually brokered the contract.
True.
Like, it's kind of like having your like Freddie Mac, but Wells Fargo is the servicer.
It's fair. So individually, each demon had their own time in the sun, so to speak, as the bad guy. Obviously, Gristlebrand was the first one that we as players became accustomed to through the Innistrad story. Then, of course, there's the Shadows over Innistrad story arc, where Razaketh, not Razaketh, I'm sorry, where Kothafed took over, I think.
No, that was Corset.
That was Corset?
Yeah,
okay.
That was Corset.
Then Kothafed was the original demon that Liliana met first. Belzenlok being the final demon during the Dominaria storyline, and Razaketh, I think we ran into on Amonkhet in that case.
Yeah.
And we've seen different interactions with, and we've seen how Liliana is driven by this deal with these demons and these devils before. So sending her back to Innistrad and all the way through Kaladesh and all those different places to try to take advantage or to try to figure her way out of this contract with her demons.
Also realizing that, Liliana's not working with these people because she likes them. It's like, for a while, Liliana was kind of going down this anti-hero road. We had what happened with Eldritch Moon, where, her zombies were the only thing that were immune to Emrakul's warping influence. And so, she takes this oath, but then you realize that, she's still got 2 more demons to deal with. And so, you start to really see that black side of her, that black mana side of her of, I'm not doing this because I like people. I've got things to do. And I realize that it's foolish to do it alone. So if I hang out with y'all, I've got a much better shot.
Now, the creative director insisted that this was coincidental, but Liliana Vess is an anagram of a villainous.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Also, I enjoy how, how's she going to work her way out of these demons? I guess she'll just kill them. It's like...
I think a couple, to me, they seem to go down a little quickly, where it's like, really? Like, it took you all this time, and this is... They all feel very anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's like Belzenlok's like, oh, I got all this power, and Gideon's like, poke, and you're dead. GG, bro.
Griselbrand, yeah, where it was like, okay.
Well, Griselbrand's situation was that at that point, he was fighting against Avacyn and 2 planeswalkers and an army.
Right.
Griselbrand's I can at least understand a little bit.
Sure.
Belzenlok, you're right. He did get poked, but he got poked by a sword that is 20 years old in the Magic game and is the most ancient and evil artifact. I almost put the Black Blade on my list. So,
Like, I appreciate that they made cards for all of them, but when they sort of started off with Griselbrand, you're like, whoa, this is an amazing card. And it's like, can you tell me anything Kothafed does? Like, actual anything? I couldn't remember a word on this card, let alone it was Kothafed Soul Hoarder that showed up in Magic Origins. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Aaron, what's your number 8?
Over the last few years, we've had a lot of conversations about the word consent. And you see sci-fi try to tackle that too. I remember a very memorable episode of Star Trek Next Generation where you have this race of telepaths, and there's the idea of going in people's minds without their permission and performing alterations on people without their permission as well, and that whole angle. And my number 8 really, really encapsulates that. My number 8 is one of the conspirators that Ruben touched on a little earlier. My number 8 is Momir Vig. So Momir Vig was the Elven guild leader of the Simic back on original Ravnica. A lot of people don't know this, but the Simic's real purpose is the health of Ravnica.
Yeah.
It's not all 4 arms and 2 boobs and frog lizard coyotes. They do have a real purpose of keeping Ravnica healthy and safe in a medical context. But Momir got bored, and he decided that he was going to expand on his premise of making Ravnica better and healthier. So he creates these things called cytoplasts, which are these little globules that can store and transfer genetic information. So if somebody's dumb, you can make them smart. If somebody's weak, you can make them buff. The problem is
If only I had some globules for me. Yeah.
The problem is that nobody on Ravnica wanted this. They were like, we're good, thanks. And so Vig was like, no, you're having this. And so he tailored them to such a point where they became almost parasites, where all they had to do was come in contact with you and they would change you. And so he launched this massive plan to remake Ravnica in this image, essentially playing God, the playing God scientist villain trope. And so he works together with Svogthir, and they activate Project Kraj, which turns this giant, evolving cytoplasm, who ends up also being killed by Agro's Coast, and so who's possessed by Savra's body. And so this is an offshoot of Ruben's initial choice. But you just have this idea of, thinking, it's better for people, what does better mean, and not having their consent to change them, and how terrifying that is.
I mean, imagine if giant, boogery blisters were coming at you, and if they touch you, they're on you forever.
Yep.
I don't care if it makes me smarter or not. That's gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely just like water balloons of turning you into a vampire or a werewolf or whatever. Yeah, Momer Vig is not a good dude. Definitely a different play on the villain trope. This is the misguided villain that would bring you back to his lair and show you his secret plan and say, "Look, don't you see what I'm trying to do for all of Ravnica?"
Yeah.
And yeah.
And you're like, wow,
God,
you're crazy.
You're a crazy person. I need to get out of here. Somebody go get Barry the Platypus. But yeah, Experiment Kraj was rampaged all over Ravnica and was a huge force of chaos. Not necessarily evil itself, but it's, you know, with Momir Vig at the helm for Frankenstein's monster, certainly was a huge bad guy in that story arc. Absolutely.
Also, Savra just gets like, you know, possessed by everybody. Like Swathgear's in there, then Agris Cause is in there. Is there like a waiting room for taking over Savra? I don't know.
It's like being John Malkovich.
Exactly. Malkovich. All right. Let's move on here to number 7. Surprise, I don't have one. Ruben, what's number 7?
Evan, do you want to be on the show?
Maybe.
Do you want to? I mean, you can later. I'm just asking. Are
later.
You feeling okay? If you need some water, you need a snacky poop.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Well, in the meantime, I have my number 7, which will take us to the world of Theros. And Theros is an interesting plane that has very active godlike figures in it. And over the course of the story, someone ascended to godhood, and in not the best way that I can possibly imagine, Xenagos became the god of revels. So Xenagos was a satyr person who was a planeswalker as well, who was not just happy with being the king of his lands. He wanted to ascend to godhood. And as a result, forced Crufix to enact something called the Silence, and sent them away to from Theros, which left him a path to replace on the Pantheon, because there can only be so many gods at one time. Then the Battle of Akros occurred, and Xenagos ascended to becoming the Great Revel, the god of parties, essentially, and threw off everything on Theros until, once again, Planeswalkers had to come and fix it. Ajani and Elspeth, which ultimately led to Elspeth dying. And so Xenagos' actions can be drawn back to one of the big heroes in Magic losing their life.
You ever party so hard you became a god? Like, I know that there's like party gods, but you ever partied so hard it was like during the victory celebration? The victory celebration was the, quote, final ingredient to Xenagos' divine ascension. Yeah. I want to throw a party that hard. Yeah. I want it to be so good I get to be godlike. That's amazing. And then he pissed off Heliod, who then wanted to punish all of mortal kind for the actions of the new god. How dare you let this happen? Non-mortal or mortals to the non-mortals.
What kind of an angle Heliod? Heliod could be a villain in this story too. I would not be surprised to spot Heliod on this list.
A neat take on planeswalkers that we really hadn't seen before. You know, I think a lot of people would look at what planeswalkers are capable of and think that's good enough. Like, if I can just, you know, if I can planeswalk, you know, maybe I'll take over a world or two. But like, I'm pretty happy with like where I'm at. But to have a planeswalker with such raw ambition of like, no, this isn't enough. Like, planeswalking is not enough. I need to be a god. Like, that's a whole other level of ambition right there, and something we've never really seen before.
Party rocking, y'all. Party rocking. That's what he do. That's what he do. Aaron, what's number 7?
My number 7 is probably going to be my first hot take on the list. I really agonized whether or not this one should be included, but just seeing some of the things that this character did, I think their behavior is warranted. You know, we talk about the reasons why people find themselves as villains, and this is a character that had very unique motivations, fears. They were worried about being you know, inadequate or losing their power, and some of the desperate things that we do to maintain it. My number 7 is Una, Queen of the Fae. So Una is a character from Lorwyn, and she is responsible for the Great Auroras, which essentially, if I understand it correctly, turn Lorwyn into Shadowmoor. And every time that happens, people tend to lose their memories. So they kind of start over fresh after this process is over with. Una is one of the few people, because she controls the Auroras, that this doesn't happen to. So this allows her to maintain her power, maintain her information. The mending happens, and an Aurora is coming that she didn't plan on. And so this terrifies her. And so she starts kind of going on this mad power trip to make sure that she survives this thing. She doesn't want to lose her memories. Memories are very important. And so she goes so far as to create a double of herself called Marilyn, to store her power and her memories in. The only problem is Marilyn don't want to do that. So it leads to this weird little war between them. And you just see Una becoming more and more desperate. These fairies that were once sort of fun and fancy-free and maybe a little bit mischievous start getting just kind of downright nasty, and the information network starts growing. Una starts kind of tightening the reins a little bit, and you just see her becoming more and more desperate. And so you have this character that is so beautiful and so ethereal, but really is just terrified, and somebody who's not in control anymore. And just her motivations just really kind of spoke to me, and just you see just this descent of how far she's willing to go to not lose herself. This thing that she's willing to put other people through, mind you. She's done Auroras for years, but now that she's about to become one, it's a problem.
Interesting. She basically kind of she sort of takes over Marilyn. Like Marilyn lived or existed before then. Marilyn had something alien in her, as Riss and the other characters noted. That was really interesting. The same observation was later made by the Vendilion clique, who tried to steal her dream stuff, or the Flamekin Aisling when she tried to heal her. Interesting. Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And Una herself, I mean, I loved Una. The look, the feel, the power of the card itself was awesome. Like, I am certainly... I feel like it's definitely a win and not an if we go back to Lorwyn. I just don't know how they're going to do it.
It's so hard to go back to Lorwyn from an advertising perspective, simply because there aren't humans there. And it's a beautiful plane. I love Lorwyn. You guys know I love Lorwyn.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful plane, and it is so hard to find villains. I mean, it's a really compelling story, and there are so many moving parts, and yet... who's the villain? And Una is as close as we're going to get, and definitely caused a lot of strife. But I'm not sure is evil so much as just capricious.
I think it also makes for a good palate cleanser set. Like, we had Kaladesh, where it was like, we came off a Battle for Zendikar. We had Shadows over Innistrad, and Wizards was like, okay, we need to give you a piece of pineapple because you've had two blocks of darkness. And so I think Lorwyn would be a really great reason for that. If we happen to find ourselves in another chain of dark sets, okay, let's run it back and let's go play with some fish and some goblins and
absolutely.
I
would love it.
I'm ready for a Kithkin Planeswalker, personally. I think that would be dope, but I guess we'll see. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Again, I'll see you guys in a bit. Ruben, what's number 6?
You want to take a nap? I'm just checking in with you. You feeling okay? My number 6, I was surprised that this was so low on my list, because Volrath was a big key piece of the early story. With how high we've had Gerard and Sisay and the rest of the Weatherlight Saga on our heroes list, I would have thought that I would have had Volrath up in the top 5 at least, maybe like 2 or 3, but we've had a lot of villains recently that have been taken over. So Volrath is relegated to number 6. Volrath did get his own card from the Nemesis expansion.
My favorite flavor text.
And the card is sweet. The flavor text is amazing. The art's amazing. It's not spectacular, but that's what you get.
Well, so he stepped out. He did not step down.
I love that.
There you go. Yeah. Volrath began life as Fool, the son of Cedar Kondo in Dominaria. Failed his rite of maturity. And left the clan after Gerard was sort of the adopted son, had a sort of Esau situation, like from the Bible. Stole the legacy weapon and deactivated Karn. Vul then went to war against his father and killed him. Then Phyrexia is like, hey, that's a good recruit. and then recruited him, took him back to Wrath, where he took over and became the Ascendant of Inkar. Not the Ascendant of Inkar, but became the Ivinkar of Wrath. Used the Predator as a cudgel to just destroy the Sky Shroud Forest, took over the Stronghold, was ever present through the Mercadia story arc, and then back to Wrath for Nemesis, and then finally was put to death after his Phyrexian implants were removed when he returned to Wrath, I believe.
Wow.
Or to Dominaria. Sorry, no, he returned to Dominaria, and the power of the Ivinkar was being sort of tussled over by Grevin and Urtai and Krovax, and he entered the context himself and challenged Krovax to a duel by death, but his implants were gone at that point, and so he ended up losing and was beheaded in a particularly gross fashion at the end, and was just an ever-present villain character throughout the initial Weatherlight, 12 or so sets.
Yeah, I definitely recognize Volrath's impact, and he ended up being on my short list. This might be controversial, I just didn't find him very interesting. Like, I didn't really see anything in his storyline that we hadn't already kind of seen before, where it was like, he was adopted, he failed his puberty test, rah, rah, rah. It was just like, all right, what else you got? Like, I definitely recognize his callousness and the impact that he had, but just going through the storyline, there was just nothing that really jumped out at me about, like, there were other people in his orbit, which we'll talk about a little later. But in terms of Volrath himself, I just didn't find him as interesting.
This was my number 10. And I agree. I was a little shocked myself, excuse me, at how low he was ultimately on the list. I was just like, wow, I was expecting to be higher, because the way, so this was the hero's journey, right? The Weatherlight saga was very clear. The hero's journey beginning to end. Rosewater's been very clear about that. And what he wanted something about some sort of family connection there, where Gerard gets accepted into the family. And then later Stark added poison to the ritual paintings applied to Volrath, to Vule's body. Vule's body. And Gerard tried to help save him. And that was like two things on top of each other. And then after he was pissed off at Gerard, because even his father shunned him, because basically if you fail this test, you have to let somebody die. You have to let them die. And Gerard was like, I'm not okay with that. But later Stark then of course went back to Double Cross, and then was like, with Vule and trying to help him out and make him essentially, get whatever he was looking for and get his revenge and whatnot. It's kind of crazy that, again, this is like should have be one of the biggest villains ever in Magic, but ultimately when you kind of look back, you're just like, he's all right. And then my favorite, I think, is they're fighting it out, to the death in this thing, and Volrath's experience was apparent, but Krovax drew extra strength by killing the spectators. And I'm just like,
that was awesome.
I'm just like, kill the spectators. I feel refreshed. Like, what? What does that mean? But then Urtai,
that's cool. That's interesting. That makes Krovax. That to me makes me want to root for Krovax more. Why would you give somebody like Krovax spectators that he can feed off of? Like, I like that.
As he died, Vule's last sight was the sky of his homeland of Dominaria as the Wrathy overlay began. This is where they had Wrath, and it like literally overlaid on top of Dominaria so really they could invade.
Cool.
Yeah, super cool. All right, so that was your number 6. Aaron, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a character that Evan might be familiar with, and this is a character we've talked a little bit on the pre-show today about when you have leaders that are so convinced that they are what you need. And they go to really great lengths to stay in power. And even when it's clearly not working, they still sell you this dream of, no, I've got this, and I'm the only one that can save you. My number 6 is Takeshi Kanda. So Takeshi Kanda was the ruler of Kamigawa. He lived in Eiganjo Castle, which is a card that some of you might be familiar with. Kanda wanted to ensure peace and prosperity for his people. So in order to do this, he decided to just change the whole world, like you do. With the help of some allies, he does this ritual, this sacrilegious ritual that breaks the barrier between the mortal and the spirit world. He captures and imprisons a part of Okagachi, which is another card some of you might be familiar with, which is awesome, which is huge. Unfortunately, while this also caused Kanda to stop aging and basically be immortal, it also plunged Kamigawa into a 20-year war between the mortal and the spiritual side. And at no point is he thinking, maybe I could have handled this better. Oh no, it's, I've got you. I'm your leader. I will always be your leader, and I'm going to help you. As everything's falling apart around him, the arrogance, the hubris of this, you've done the complete opposite of what you wanted to do, but you're still convinced that you've got this thing. And finally, at the end of it, Kanda's daughter Michiko and Okagachi's daughter Kyodai basically puncture his eyes out, petrify him, and then crush him into dust. And so this is just a really fascinating case study of somebody who just can't see, you know, if you happen to look at all the flavor text that mentions Kanda, it's just this narrow focus of like, you know, everything's fine, Night of Souls betrayal, the spirits are literally rebelling. As everything falls apart around him, he just can't see it.
Wow. I mean, the idea, well, first of all, that his daughter is the one that's going to be ultimately kill him and take him down. They smash him into a million pieces, which is crazy. I love, there's something, obviously I love Kamigawa, okay? Yeah. But part of what I really enjoy about it is that stuff happens there, stuff is named there, stuff is sort of treated in a way that just no other place is going to treat them. No other place in Magic is going to have a thing called That Which Was Taken. That sort of very high level spiritual almost kind of vibe. I love that stuff. You don't get that anywhere else. That's the beauty of Kamigawa to me, is we're like, oh, that's really cool. There's a whole spirit world thing that you can take advantage of that no other place can. Just really sweet.
Yeah.
So, and clearly I'm a huge fan of Takeshi Kanda. So
yeah, and the hubris hero is, or the hubris villain is just another excellent. It's just a really well done version of that trope too.
See, and even in doing my research of this, in the Vorthos community, this is seen as being one of the best written stories of how to do a villain. Just rave reviews.
Nice. All right, let's move on here to number 5. I ain't got one. Ruben, you got a number 5?
You still napping there, buddy? Do you need carrot sticks and some ranch dressing for
toothpicks for the eyes?
It's almost time for you to come back. Almost. Just take another brief nap. So we're going to go way back for my number 5. We're going way back to the Battle Mage, Ravidel, who was a planeswalker from an unnamed plane, who was a main character in the Ice Age and Homelands comics.
Wow.
And among the things that Ravidel did was use the Mox Beacon, which included the Mox Sapphire, the Mox Jet, and the Mox Ruby, in order to draw a bunch of planeswalkers to Dominaria, so that they would slaughter each other in a ravine, essentially, of Ravidel's own making. And that led to Karandor on Dominaria having the huge overlay a problem and the planar rift issues that Mangara of Karandor, for example, suffered under. And was a big major feature of the storyline for a very, very, very long time. Launched a series of attacks on various, heroes and kingdoms and other planeswalkers, but the Mox Beacon being the crowning achievement.
Wow. Yeah, okay. He and his draconic friend Ruel were killed during the summit of the Null Moon.
Oh, okay.
And he was resurrected with a fully manifested spark by Christina of the Woods and Taysir. Okay, that's pretty cool. This one is like so far back. I ain't got much on this one. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the story back in the day when I first started playing, because I liked the game more than the story. And so, because I had no idea who Leshrac was and why it was important, but I knew that Limdul has some cards, and that's pretty sweet. But yeah, Ravidel has certainly a long history, aka the Battle Mage.
Right. Also was the one who used the Golgothian Silex originally, which I believe is the weapon that Karn now possesses.
Yes.
That he's going to use to try to blow up New Phyrexia. So long-lasting impact as well.
And I'm sure that's going to go great for Karn, by the way.
I'm sure it's going to go really well.
It's going to go super good. Aaron, what's your number 5?
Speaking of Karn and his whoopsies, that Karn and his there are so many things that lead back to Karn, not even intentionally, but just Karn not really understanding, you know, the scope of his actions. And I think no character embodies that more than my number 5. My number 5 is Memnarch. So Karn initially starts off and he creates a realm or a plane called Argentum. And Karn creates golems to sort of watch over the world, one of them being the Warden of Galdrun, which is Karn's castle. Karn decides to leave Argentum to train Jeska, and he gives this warden 2 things. One of the things he gives them is the Mirari. The Mirari alone starts to have kind of a corrupting influence on this warden. And so the warden, having a lot of free time on his hands, starts to really look around at this world that Karn created, which is for all intents and purposes pretty boring. There's no conflict, there's no anything. It's just perfect, if you will. But all of a sudden he discovers the blink moths, and Memnarch can't figure out how life got on this artificial plane. And so the Mirari starts to do its work on Memnarch, and he starts to become very obsessed with this. And he decides he wants more life. Can't figure out how it got there, but he wants more of it. So he creates these soul traps. And starts to kidnap people from all over and just bring them to this plane. And then inadvertently also becomes corrupted by Phyrexian oil. So the Phyrexian oil and the Mirari just really starts to spin Memnarch completely out of control. He just becomes obsessed with trying to perfect this plane, and then decides to take it one step further and says, you know what, I want to be a planeswalker. I want to be like Karn. And so that becomes his new quest. And again, you just sort of see this descent into madness where somebody goes from just kind of quietly learning things to becoming a lot more militant about it and just kind of using brute force to enact their idea of perfection or what they believe life should be. And just a very sad story. You know, it just starts off kind of innocently enough, just kind of wanting to understand how life works, to kidnapping people, altering people, wanting to steal a spark from Glissa, forcing Glissa's spark out of her, you know, attempting to, you know, just enact his will in very terrifying ways. And yeah, just very, very sad.
Wow. Yeah. The idea that the Mirari like becomes a thing, like a being, which is really interesting. And then it becomes corrupted by the Phyrexian oil, which is really neat. And then Karn has to be like, whoa, what is in the world's happening here? This is crazy. And then Glissa was a planeswalker that whole time, and he was trying to steal a spark from her, which was sweet. Yeah, the Karn restored the souls of everyone that died using the power of Glissa's spark to cast the spell. The kidnapped inhabitants were returned to their long-forgotten homes, and Karn destroyed Memnarch's body, recovering the Mirari, which was given to Glissa, Slowbad, and Geth to guard.
Yeah, I mean, and the impact even after he was gone, you know, there are people who were brought to this world that didn't ask to be there, that now don't have any way to really go back. And, you know, you also have the Memnites, which were created by Memnarch, that now don't have any sort of goal or mission anymore. And so, you know, there's a lot to say about villains and the work they do while they're still there. But when you see the impact, what happens after they're gone, I think that also says something about the scope of their villainy. Is, you know, you look back and Mirrodin was forever changed.
And this was my number 8. For what it's worth. So still definitely on the list. I think definitely good enough to sort of look into and be like, why was this one of the best villains? It's like, well, it kind of started from a thing, and then like he made a whole plane, and how it ties in with Karn and whatnot. Really, really cool. Let's move on here to number 4, as I actually have one.
Oh, yay.
Yay. Well, this list is whatever I want it to be now, isn't it? That's the joy of making your own list. You do what you want. Ain't no rules. Ain't no brakes on this train.
Ain't no rules say dog can't play basketball.
That's right. Look, my number 4 is an entity, if you will, that not any individual person per se, more like a group. Okay, that oftentimes you hear news and information from this group, and you go, really? Wow, seriously? That was what? What are we? Why would you do that? Can we talk about this? This is weird. My number 4 largest villain in Magic is Wizards of the Coast organized play, because I swear to God, like, we have pay the pros, we have completely destroying coverage and not saying anything about it. We have a system that kept changing over the years. We have no idea what's going on with the Hall of Fame. Wow. We have no idea what's going to happen with most organized play moving forward. And if anything, even if as many wins as they've had, which they have, they've reversed course and changed things depending on, how the winds blow or whatever. Definitely as a villain, as someone that people like to hate, as someone misunderstand, as sometimes they have motives that don't make any sense to us. These are, I think, just like the hallmarks of villains, where you're just like, I don't like those people. Like one is like, well, because they did X and Y and Z. You're like, but they also did, these good things. And so that's what to me makes villains interesting anyway, is that if they're not just, mustache twirling or whatever, it's like, wow, they made some really stupid decisions by not trying to pay the pros. And then it's like, yeah, but they also did this other cool thing where they made this, $1 million event or whatever we get to watch in a few weeks. That's really cool. So like, there's a whole bunch of give and take, but that was my list. That's my number 4 is.
I think there are villains. You do bring up a good point. There are villains that become that way due to action, and then you have those that do it due to inaction. And I would argue that if they have a place on this list, it's mostly due to inaction, where there are so many times where you could have intervened and stopped things, and you simply chose not to. And so I can see it.
Wow. Well, we're definitely not getting on the mothership with this video.
Oh no. Again, I also like to point out the fact that they're villains often because they're villainized, as it were, which I think is really interesting. Ruben, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is kind of a group, but not really. It's really one person, but is another big factor in the early Magic story. Not as early as Ravadel, but very soon thereafter, we learned about Castle Sengir and the vampire clan in Olgrotha, and the Baron and all of the thing thereof. So I guess the Baron Sengir would be who qualifies here, but of course there's also Irene and Grandmother Sengir and the Sengir vampires and whatnot from there.
Veldraine.
Veldraine, exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Baron Sengir was originally just a kid in a rich family, son of a small, low power kind of baron. But his dad essentially was grooming him for power later. And he figured out how to do it, and the Baron essentially took over Olgrotha, and the plan went without like a fault at all. No one stopped Baron Sengir at any point from turning the entire plane into an army of vampires. Not only that, but also had access to something called the Dwarven Gate, which allowed him to sort of planeswalk, sort of not. Grandmother Sengir, in fact, was a childhood friend named Ravi, that they didn't even realize until centuries later. And Ravi was a planeswalker, so there was lots of power there. This was the reason why Faraz locked the plane off from planeswalker interference. One of the main reasons, I suppose. But, eventually Faraz died because even as a planeswalker, you're still mortal. And Baron Sengir just didn't. And the whole plan just kept going. Baron Sengir just avoided the big powers until they died of natural causes, and probably is still in power in Olgrotha, in this entire plane controlled by creepy undead vampire things. Great, probably with Ishan's shade at the helm still. Just an incredibly, successful villain.
I mean, that's one way to do it. I learned as somebody who played Vampire the Masquerade, it is very possible to just outlast your enemies. And so I think that's a neat way of doing it. Like, what, I'm not even going to lift a finger. I'm just going to stay here.
Just going to wait.
And then the time lasts. The moon rising, the sun and the moon rising, you're dead and you're in power. I'm on board.
Yeah, just like, I'll give it 100 years. It's fine. I gotta do some fishing or something. I don't know. Maybe sleep for a little while.
Yeah.
Homelands and Olgrotha, like, it's literally the pipe dream of, they were sitting in Wizards of the Coast, and Peter Atkinson said, anybody want to make a magic set? Anybody got a magic set idea? And 2 guys from customer service were like, we gotta make a magic set. And then they seriously made that set. That's Homelands. So bad, pissed off the devs, the R&D so bad they wouldn't work on it, which is why every card sucks. Like the whole story behind it, because this lore, like the idea of what Baron Sengir does and how he interacts with Faraz and Sarah, that's super cool. There was nothing bad about the story of Homelands.
The cards
of Homelands were terrible. The story was great, and that's what makes makes it so difficult to even think about coming back versus like having a few throwback, like maybe another Baron Singer card they'll make or something. But to go like all the way big set pre-release, you know, whatever into the world of Homelands, like I just don't think that's ever happening. I think Kamigawa's got a chance. I think Old Growth has no chance. Aaron, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is another hot take, controversial choice. Could go either way. This is a card that just changed the game. When you look at what Death Touch had been a thing for a while, but never had a player. Never was it possible to give Death Touch and use Death Touch to eliminate a player. My number 4 is Phage. So Phage started off as being a young lady named Jessica, who was Kamal's sister. Jessica, that damn Mirari again, got slashed across the tummy by the Mirari sword. And then as she lay dying, Braids came along and was like, hey girl, I got you. And so Braid sort of revives her with this dark power, and she becomes Phage. And Phage starts to fight in the pits. The Cabal is known for their Cabal pits, their Colosseums, which is how they acquire money and status. And she becomes, she has this touch that kills any sort of living material. She can only wear silk because silk is something that she won't erode. And so she eventually attracts the attention of the Patriarch himself, and they have this bizarre union because he also has sort of a death aura, and they cancel each other out. And so they start this courtship. They end up having a baby, which is a dark god, like you do. And so eventually Phage kills a woman named Nivea, who's Ixidor's mate, and then Ixidor remakes her as a Chroma. And so it starts off this civil war between these two women of a literal angel and demon. It just kind of ravages the plane. Phage, a weird little side effect of being Phage, everybody she kills creates a death worm. And as Phage is about to die, so to speak, the death worms come loose and start eating everybody.
Oh my God.
And then Jessica kind of comes up and says, I can stop this, but I have to take all the worms back into me, and I have to stay Phage. So she kind of has this hero moment, agrees to do that. And then from then on, her life gets kind of sad. The Patriarch tries to kill her, you know, as she's pregnant with his baby. She ends up killing him with the help of Braids. And so you see her kind of struggling to just have this kid and just kind of deal with sort of this new life that she has. And so, you know, at times she's a villain, at times she's an anti-hero. Really struggled with whether or not I should put her on this list, but overall I just felt all of the darkness that she encompassed, and her killing Nivea in the first place is kind of what led to, you know, this sort of civil war between the two. They're both ultimately killed by Kamal, and then Phage and Jessica dying leads to the Corona situation.
Right.
It's a really, really tragic character, and I'm not really sure if you could, I'm not sure there's enough there to really call her a hero. But
the idea that there is a creature that when it touches you, it kills you immediately is amazing. While it's an R&D line, I do think it's very flavorful that you have to actually cast her to bring her through via mana and not just cheat her into play to kill yourself. Also interesting how her creature type kept changing. Originally it was minion legend, and then it just changed to legendary creature minion. Then it changed to now in Conspiracy, when it's printed as a mythic, to legendary avatar minion. So it became an avatar at that point. But yeah, again, the idea of that with Jessica, and between that and Kamal, and how when she finally dies, she's seen in the white light with her brother and stuff, which is really sweet. So yeah, quite the journey from hero to villain to hero again.
Yeah,
when it comes to
I'm
Phage.
considering building a Lazav the Multifarious EDH deck, and I would definitely put Phage in there to be able to turn Lazav into a Phage and touch people to death.
Yeah, I mean, giving birth to a dark baby, or to a god, a dark god, that's got to put you on the villains list, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. And also note that Phage is Greek for eater.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Like a carnophage.
There you go.
There you go.
Move on here to our top
Voyager. If you watch Voyager, the phage being the disease that eats the Vidians.
Right.
Wow. Well, look, I'm going to say, look, this next villain for me, my number 3, I didn't put it as number 1 for a reason. Didn't put it as number 2 for a reason. We'll make sure that there's no ego boosts involved with how I describe this villain in particular. Because there are a few villains that we want to make sure we quantify, know, understand, put into the history books. My number 3 is Alex Bertoncini. He is one of the villainous villains to ever villain a Magic card, to explorers, to ever basically cheat and then try to come back and then cheat and then try to come back again and write a huge treatise about how he doesn't cheat anymore and then cheat and get DQ'd for life. That's a heaping. That's a whole heap's worth of villainous activity. And it is a hive of scum and villainy, and we shall not ever, hopefully, see anything like it again. I don't need that ever in my game.
You come into my house, make fun of my house, make fun of my windows, about how I make my lists of, oh, you're not allowed to have more than one character on a type line, and then you're just in a whole nother axis of, so I don't hate the choice. I think that, if this one, we should have combined our forces.
We could combine, yeah.
Been a list, an amalgam of all of the historically bad folks who have impacted our game negatively by their rootin' tootin' cheating ways.
Like if there were multiple people here, this would be Alex Bertoncini, Mike Long. This would be all of these sort of the classic cheaters that we don't want in the game.
Underground Dojo Keyboard Cage Fighters. This would be, there's a number, and the Backpack Stealers from Chicago 2007. I mean, there's a number of people who are legitimately honest to goodness villains. There are people who've assaulted people at Magic tournaments who are full-time banned that I could name here, but I don't want to give them press. There are actual real life villains. I mean, it's if you're going to go in this direction, I'm okay with it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, I think, falls into several of the villain tropes. The villain where it didn't necessarily have to go this way. That there were plenty of opportunities to turn the ship around, and he just didn't do it. The inability to he can't help himself. I think you mentioned that, Ruben, earlier in the show. That being a thing, the way we look at cheaters. It just didn't have to go down like this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, honestly, above all things. But there was a redemption arc that could have happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just didn't. And that's sort of where we're at. Ruben, what's your number 3?
My number 3, thankfully, Evan just had a ludicrous number 3. So that my number 3 looks less bad by comparison.
Nice.
My number 3 is awesome.
Nice. My number 3 is also awesome. My number 3, in fact, is one of the biggest story points of the past 5 years. Several sets, as a matter of fact. Too many sets, probably, as a matter of fact, have centered around the 3 Eldrazi Titans, known as Emrakul, Ulamog, and Kozilek. That is my number 3.
I'm a red zone you on this one.
Oh, all right. Well, okay.
The Eldrazi Titans are supremely powerful beings. The question of whether it's nefarious is obviously an issue here, but it's from our perspective as humans, when something comes to destroy us, that's an evil force because we consider ourselves to be on the side of good. All-consuming, uncaring, all-powerful beings that will lead to the destruction of the known multiverse. I'm going to qualify as evil. Wow. And for thousands of years, people from Ugin to Nahiri to the Gatewatch, everybody in between, trying to cage these animals and keep them at bay from destroying everything that anyone has ever known and consuming it all like the crystalline entity that's pretty terrifying.
It's interesting because I don't think they can be quantified as bad, and I think we didn't see that more than with Emrakul's final appearance, where Nahiri thought it was going to be as simple as I'm just going to lure this thing here. When Emrakul had that really enigmatic chess game with Jace, and she basically said, "Why aren't they happy to see me? Like, why aren't they?" They aren't supposed to be fighting me like this. And so there were some allusions there to the fact that they really do have a process, no pun intended, where you have Ulamog that kind of raises the earth and kind of turns it into that weird tooth enamel stuff. you have Kozilek, which creates the new, turns that enamel into these colored sort of jagged rocks full of mana. And then you have Emrakul that really does bring new life. I mean, it's warped, hideous, terrible life, but it's a process there. And can we really say that this is bad? Can we really say that, this is just what they do? And, when you have something on sort of a almost primal level like that, it's bad in that if we're on the other side of it, we cease to exist. But, it opens up a lot of discussions as to what their real purpose is and whether or not it's just how they're built, what their purpose is. And I'm definitely glad that you have it, because I'm anxious to see how people react to this, because I took them off my list for that reason, because I was like, I don't think it's bad.
I will call them bad. I think you can call them bad. I think they're bad. I think it's like you're saying, there's nothing inherently bad with a nuclear bomb. It's nature to completely destroy the universe.
There's a difference between bad and evil. And I think that that's what's at play here.
Okay.
There's no disagreement that they're bad. There's no disagreement that if the Eldrazi show up, it's bad news. But there is disagreement here, and I think it's well-founded, of whether or not they're evil. Because evil has a lot to do with intention.
Yeah.
Right? And so if they can't help themselves, is a tornado evil?
Right. How much of it is it force of nature, whether it's just instinct, as in terms of premeditated, we're going to kill this person, destroy this race, whatever, because I want to, because I'm going after an end. There's a means to an end. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of means there. It's just an end.
Honestly, I don't think we know enough about the Eldrazi and who they are, what they come from, and if they are a who as opposed to a what, to judge if they're evil at this point. What we learned during the Shadows of Innistrad story arc is that at very least, Emrakul has something else going on up there in the old noggin.
And see, I find that more fascinating. I'm more interested in that than I am sort of the mustache twirling Bolas, be done with that already. But I want to know more about Emrakul. And I really, that by the end of Shadows over Innistrad, I think we were also tired with Eldrazi fatigue, but that last little conversation with Jace brought me back into it, where I was like, I want to know more. I want to know what you're up to.
The whole Tamio putting Emrakul in the moon and Emrakul essentially letting it happen.
Yes. Oh my God.
Super, what is happening here? I
can't wait.
Well, between that and Chandra, burn the other two to death or something, or burn them to death, aka they went back to the Blind Eternities. I'm ready for the Doctor Strange set. Mark Rosewater tried to explain, they couldn't do a set in the Blind Eternities because it's a series of doorways. And I'm just yeah, but at the same time, Doctor Strange exists with, Thor and X-Men or whoever. And he has his own.
Yeah, the Astral Sea exists in Dungeons and Dragons with the Githyanki and the Githers Eye. And I think
Githyanki, y'all.
Githyanki,
never heard that before.
They're like space pirates.
Is that like Daddy Yankee?
It's essentially like Guardians of the Galaxy space pirates are the Gith.
Wow.
And I think that would definitely make for an interesting set. It would be very complicated, you're right. But they've got enough practice. They've got enough work under their belts that they could probably make it work.
Well, I want Doctor Strange the set. I want Guardians of the Galaxy the set. I think they could do that if they really wanted to, and this would be a way to do that. I don't really want anything to do with the Eldrazi for 5 years. Just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Battle for Zendikar was so miserable. Ugh. Cool. Yeah.
Quick shout out to Merit Lodge here, because I doubt that we'll get to Merit Lodge, but another Cthulhu mythos from a different creative team 15 years earlier was another big natural disaster on Dominaria and ended up getting frozen during the Ice Age, and nothing ever became of it because then we got a different creative team that made a different Cthulhu mythos.
Top 10, are they bad or are they evil? Got it. All right. Aaron, what's your number 3?
Every villain needs to have a henchman. It's just a rule. And if the villain is sort of a brute force villain, then you need to have a brainy sidekick. And if your primary villain happens to be a brain, you need to have some brawn. And there's not too much meat there. It's very easy to have sort of one-dimensional sidekicks. But my number 3 has so much depth to them, and I voted for them even higher. I didn't even put their boss on my list because I just didn't find them interesting. But I found this character so fascinating that even more so than their boss. My number 3 is Grevin Ilvac. So Grevin is Volrath's right-hand man, sort of the muscle. And it would be very easy for him to just sort of be a meathead, to just sort of be powerful, to be strong. But this character, man, I mean, coming out of the gate so strong with throwing Vati over the boat. I mean, that's just so gangsta. And like, what a way to introduce someone to the plot line. You have Grevin with sort of this mimetic spine, this artificial spine that Volrath uses to painfully control him and to keep him enslaved. You see him doing these very vicious, cruel acts in Volrath's name. And then when Krovax takes over, that's sort of Grevin's window to get out. Unfortunately, the window closes, and Krovax ends up being even more cruel than Volrath. And so you just see this poor bastard who just spends so much of their life in servitude that it just sort of warps them. They don't know what freedom is. You really understand to a certain degree why Grevin is the way that he is. He isn't just a me smash kind of baddie. And just a very sad, we've said that a lot with a lot of these villains, but, Grevin getting killed by Krovax and having his body thrown on the wreckage. I mean, just somebody who's known nothing but servitude and cruelty, and it gives you such an amazing backstory. And I cared so much more about Grevin than I did Volrath, which is not easy to do, but just this character, man.
Grevin was much more of an ever-present force, being Volrath's enforcer and being the captain of the Predator, which was the mirror image, the yin to, or the yang to the yin of the Weatherlight, which was the main crux point, the main boat, as opposed to the side boat, of that whole story arc. And ultimately being defeated at the hands of the Weatherlight. Once the Weatherlight got its mirrored hull and had received a bunch of upgrades, the time that, and Volrath had fallen and Grevin had become weaker. And so in that whole time, the Weatherlight was on, hashtag self-care, and the Predator was really floundering at that point. And even still, Commander Grevin Ilvek managed to board the Weatherlight and get into hand-to-hand combat, where he was summarily defeated by Tongarth, among others, and his, as you mentioned, his body thrown amongst the refuse. But yeah, really good villain, really compelling villain, really, and a villain with a capital V through and through.
I mean, look, quote, quote, "I will flay the skin from your flesh." And the flesh from your bones, and scrape your bones dry, and still you will not have suffered enough.
Hashtag sexed. I mean, just
Heyo. Wow. Grevin Ilvek to Gerard. This is the character on Fevered Convulsions, for God's sakes. Yeah. As Volrath to Grevin says, "Tell me again why you failed to capture Gerard, you worthless pile of spine."
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's not a good life either.
No.
I mean, he is a villain, but it's he's a dog on a leash for a lot of the story.
Yeah, and it's really incredible. I mean, quote, "I've come to reclaim what is mine, and you, Grevin, are mine," says Volrath on the Commander version of Dominate.
Yeah.
That's just fantastic. And I agree. There's so much. It's weird how Grevin is so much more interesting than Volrath. It's kind of shocking, honestly.
Yeah.
That said, let's move on here to number 2. Now, look, obviously, we've been highlighting a lot of my weird choices because they weren't on your list, whereas all my you would expect them choices are higher on somebody else's list or whatever. Like Emrakul was my number 7, Mimmark was my number 8, whatever. But last week we talked about our top 10 heroes, and sure enough, number 1 was one Mr. Mark Rosewater as one of the heroes.
No, you didn't.
So my number 2 villain is Mark Rosewater because he has been chosen as the villain so many times. Now I'll tell you, these days in modern Magic, it's not happening as much, okay? But look, I come from the old school, y'all. I was playing in the 90s, all right? And let me tell you, when something went wrong, when somebody was pissed off about a decision, particularly as soon as I came back in the world of Mirrodin, everyone was super pissed off about everything. Everything was Rosewater's fault. Rosewater did this. How dare Rosewater do that? This is bad. I hate Rosewater. Everyone blamed Rosewater for everything all the time and making him a villain because they didn't really have, he's the face more or less of Magic the Gathering, of Wizards of the Coast.
Did you know that Aaron Forsyth is actually higher ranked than he is?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it was the other way around.
Oh no. I mean, Aaron's been his boss for a long time now.
I didn't know that.
Right. And that's cool, again, but not necessarily in the world of what you see and what you hear from Wizards of the Coast. Rosewater has just been put in that villainous position. Again, it's much like organized play. It's not even that they're evil. It's that they do things that people think are bad, which then make them assume that it's evil, which then makes them assume as villains.
I had Rosewater on my short list just because when I think about all the cards that I hate, I think of Leyline of the Void, I think of Grafdigger's Cage, I think of Containment Priest. Those had to have crossed his desk. And he was fine with all of this. Stop it. Why would you do this to us? And so, yeah, he was on my short list for a little while. But again, I just had so many good options. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready to sell that. I'll let somebody else try it.
That's my complaint, is that there are so many villains I had to leave off of my list from the Magic story arc. And you're going to put Mark Rosewater here?
Yeah. Because it's important in the context of Magic. Over time, who has been made a villain? Rosewater was made a villain. I do think
that Mark Rosewater will ruin Magic again. He will do it. I have faith.
Oh my gosh. Ruben, what's your number 2?
Because every time he's ruined Magic, it's only gotten better. My number 2 is somehow I have this as the highest, and I'm by myself. And I get it that, we had Eldrazi fatigue, and I guess now we have Dragon fatigue. But how are you going to deny that Nicol Bolas doesn't deserve to be this high on the list? How is that even occur to you?
I have a couple of reasons why he didn't make my list. One, I'm exhausted. 2, I just don't know where else it can go. Like, he's been positioned in such a way where there's just no stakes anymore. Like, when you create a villain that's just so, what else can they do? Like, when Amonkhet happened and you sort of saw the defeats, I was expecting more of a recovery period. It just didn't happen, where it was like, okay, where was the stakes there? Where was the oomph there? Where was the, I feel like Bolas is constantly made up as it goes along. I just don't care about him, and that's a bad thing to say for your villain.
That's true. I think that it is coming to a head in an Avengers Endgame style with War for
Let's hope.
So, we might get a new generation of villains popping up later after the Ravnica, the third Ravnica set wraps up here. But Nicol Bolas, I mean, it's hard to deny throughout the history of Magic the Gathering, becoming a god, becoming a planeswalker, being a dragon, having all of these thousands of years of power, having all of these other minor villains underneath of you, all of these heroes that they turned into villains underneath of you, the influence, the intrigue, the excitement for when Nicol Bolas was first printed as a planeswalker, the excitement for when it was reprinted as a creature in Time Spiral, the excitement for Nicol Bolas, the Ravager in Core Set. Every time a Nicol Bolas comes out, people are excited that the card exists. Every time that Nicol Bolas is in a story arc, it goes, oh crap, what do we do now? And of course, there is the ever-loving or the ever indelible flavor text of Cruel Ultimatum. There is always a greater power.
Wow. I mean, well, look, first of all, this was my number 5. I put him right below my nonsense. But he was definitely up there in my top 5. I get it. My choice was a little silly, and that's okay. But Nicol Bolas,
terrified as to what your number 1's.
Oh, you're going to love the number 1. If you think Rosewater's number 2, oh baby, I got a special one for number 1. I know what y'all's number 1 is because it's my number 6, but fine. The point is, like,
6.
Let me just tell you. Yes, let me just tell you. Well, again, nonsense. Push stuff down.
Nicol Bolas at 5, and
right.
Our number 1 at 6 because he left his top 5 for complete and utter nonsense.
Look, that's what I'll tell you a little story. This is great. This is just a little nugget from Nicol Bolas's past. This is amazing. Bolas once fought a demonic Leviathan planeswalker on the still young plane of Dominaria. The fight lasted a month, reduced Madara to a third of its original size, created the first temporal rift. In the end, the dragon relied upon his touch to defeat the foe. After the battle, Bolas feasted on the remains of the Leviathan for over a year, absorbing its power in the process. Which was, just, I feel more powerful today. When he finished, not was left besides what eventually became known as the Talon Gates, and an assortment of blubber. Bolas regards the Talon Gates as his finest trophy and visits them in Madara as often as he can to relish that victory. That's just a tiny little speck of something that happened to Nicol Bolas.
That is a villainous thing to say.
I mean, I respect the petty of like, I'm gonna chew on you for a full year and let you think about what you've done. But yeah, I think really it's just the length of time where it's like, you know, I would have been happy if this had really wrapped up on Amonkhet, and if there had just been some real stakes there, you know, when you're killing people. I love to think of, my mom used to watch Days of Our Lives back in the day. That's a reference like 4 of you will understand. Sure. But I remember they did this plot line of like the Days Killer, where like it was killing off main characters left and right. And there was an oomph there. There was a feeling of like, oh my God, John's dead, Marlena's dead. These are characters who've been on the show for years. And then you were like, nope, it's all a dream and they're all on an island. And it's like, no, like there needs to be real stakes there of like, you need to be killing people that we care about so that we really see, so that we really fear this villain. And I just have never feared Bolus. It's always been
the daytime soap opera. Like, I mean, at one point, I think it was Days of Our Lives that did this. Like there was an actual witch, like a witch who was casting spells was on the daytime show. It was hilarious. It was incredible. So
yeah, sounds great.
Anyway, Aaron, what's your number 2?
So my number 2, for me, a sign of a good villain is someone that we still talk about. You know, villains, a lot of the villains on our list have had moments, they've had arcs, and then we've never heard from them again. You know, they're maybe confined to their block or to their plane. But I think if 10, 15, 20 years go by and your name is still on our lips, I think that says something about the impact that you've had and how evil you are. Liliana is known for having a friend known as the Raven Man. And there have been all sorts of conspiracy theories as to who the Raven Man is. And my number 2 happens to be the most popular target for this conspiracy theory. My number 2 is Limdul. So Limdul was a necromancer who terrorized Terrasair during the Ice Age, and he also conducted 2 major campaigns to conquer Chandalar. Started off as a necromancer. Eventually, he discovered a ring which belonged to Mersil the Pretender, who recently got a card themselves. Right. The ring gave Limdul powers. Limdul also got a boost of power from Leshrac, which is another name that some of you might remember. Limdul tried taking down Jaya and Joda, characters that were very popular from Dominaria. At one point, Limdul got a little confident, and Leshrac gave him horns. Because Limdul, one of the reasons Limdul was trying to acquire all of this power was that so he could break free of Leshrac's influence. And Leshrac was like, I don't know where you think you're going. Just in case you forget, here's some big old antler horns. And so Limdul just having a long history of consolidating this sort of undead, devastating power, trying and trying again, creating these wars with undead. This character was immortalized in Time of Ice, I believe, from Dominaria, one of the sagas. And so just a character that, you know, has been down but not necessarily out. There was a bit of a revision there in terms of what his fate was. And so when we found out that we were going back to Dominaria and we knew that the Raven Man was a thing, the Vorthos just started kind of pulling out the clues and the tinfoil hats and saying, it's Limdul, it's Limdul. And I would have loved to have seen it happen. But when you have a character that, you know, no one else really talks about, but people still, they want to see this character, they want more of this character, I think that really says something about what you've done and how powerful you are.
I mean, Limdul was one of those names that was all over the Ice Age cards. So when I first started playing Magic, I saw Limdul everywhere. And they've never, again, as of right now, they've never made a card of Limdul. They've never said it. That's...
Yeah, they did.
Did they make a... Oh, Limdul the Necromancer. There we go. Okay, from Time Spiral. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I see this now because I was like, wow, I'd forgot that existed because it's not very interesting. And I wish it had been more powerful and interesting now that I look at it and remember it. But, you know, Limdul as a character is super cool and interesting, and maybe we'll see another version of him.
He's one of the oldest necromancers and most powerful ones, and so I respect that.
Are you saying that game respects game? Is that why we're doing that? Okay.
A little bit.
Just checking. All right, let's move on here to number 1, and I'm going to save mine for the very, very end. You guys are going to love it. It's going to be great.
I hate it already.
Y'all have a same number 1, so take it away.
Ruben, you can kick it off.
Oh, I'll kick it off. All right. Yeah. I mean, throughout, who is more evil than Nicol Bolas? Who has corrupted more worlds than Nicol Bolas? Who has killed more people? Who has strived for more power for the sake of having power than Yawgmoth? Yawgmoth is our number 1, and I think it's not particularly close.
No.
Even with all of Nicol Bolas's center in the story arc recently, Yawgmoth, from the time of the Thran, remember the Thran? No one else does, because Yawgmoth consumed the Thran essentially and turned it into Phyrexia and has corrupted Wrath and corrupted Dominaria, sent political enemies through the Planar Gate and just stranded them on Mercadia at one point. Like, that's just a thing that was a side thing that they did one time.
Wow.
Yeah, when you think of Yawgmoth, I mean, he's known by so many names: the Ineffable, the Lord of the Wastes. Going back to the Thran Empire. I mean, I think some of the most powerful characters in the Magic lore don't even have cards. We just recently got to see Sarah, for God's sakes, and Sarah's been around for years. And this is another character that we've never really seen. There was a Yawgmoth demon, but Yawgmoth does not have a card, and Limdol had a card, which was fine. But that to me says something. Like, when you are just when your scope is so major that how do we wrap that in a card? I mean, you can't. I mean, the closest we came was very recently Yawgmoth's Bargain, or Yawgmoth's Dark
Vile Offering, right?
Right.
Yeah, Yawgmoth's Vile Offering was
right. That was really our first real taste of, like, that's what Yawgmoth looks like. Like, it took us that long, and God bless them for showing us a taste of that. But this is a character that had been an antagonist through multiple sagas. Becoming a god of the plane, his dream was to turn Dominaria into perfect beings under his rule. When you think of the Phyrexians, one of the OG Phyrexians, I mean, just look at his resume. If you go to Gamepedia.com, which is where a lot of us get our Vorthos information from, just keep scrolling. I mean, he's just been a busy character. I mean, you look at the Lord of the Waste era, you look at him being the originator of the sleeper agents like Zancha. I mean, just has done so much across the history. And the idea of false demise, could we see this?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you just can't talk about the Phyrexians without this character. You look at all the cards that they're featured on without actually being on a card. I mean, just the credentials are there.
I mean, it's nice that there's like a sort of like a little bullet list of like how completely insanely evil this guy is. He set the black cough upon the dwarves of the Oran Deeps. Casual. Oh wait, he did it again when he put the creeping mold. Remember creeping mold onto Argoth, and it turned into a virulent plague that ate away the elves there. He set the White Death upon the Minotaurs of Tal'Rum. I mean, the Tal'Rum Minotaurs, as we know them, just to study its effects, just to see what happens, the idea that this is evil incarnate is certainly easily definable. I have this again as my number 6. I think Nicol Bolas I put above, if only because the modern era has been so much focused on Nicol Bolas that it's a little bit more relatable. But
recency bias. I get you.
Right, but I'm totally happy with either of those swapping back and forth because, and my number 1 is way more evil than Yawgmoth. Don't worry, it's way more.
The most recent appearance for Yawgmoth theoretically may have appeared on some of the promo art of Nicol Bolas for War of the Spark. There might be the Yawgmoth mask on a piece.
Oh my God.
From Nicol Bolas, and if you're looking to amass power, you can do worse than that's the right kind of hero if you're a villain.
Now, a lot of people are saying that's the Immortal Sun. But it can also be looked as the Apocalypse.
But I think it says something about you that people are. I think if people didn't care, or if people didn't want that,
right?
You see what you want to see, and so I think that people are going. It's most likely the Immortal Sun, but the people are like, Yama? Yeah, what? Same thing with Limdol. It's like you hear the Raven Man, and it's like, you want that to be a thing. Are there other villains that we talk about like that? I don't think we do. So that says something about how powerful he is.
That's sort of the same people who are just like, is it Merit Lage? Is it Merit Lage coming to Fruit Innistrad? And you're just like, that package is literally shaped like Emrakul. It's the wrapping paper is around each tentacle, and yet somehow it's still Merit Lage got it.
I love it. I love it. I wanted to put Merit Lage on my list, but we just don't know too much about her.
Yeah,
we know that she's dangerous and plane hopping, but you can't really, there just aren't that many facts. You can't really Google her and see a rap sheet. It's just, she's a bad bitch. That's fine. It's like,
Right. My number 1 is the scary thing in the forest. You know what I mean? That, like, it made me pee myself when I was little. Like, that's got to be evil, Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Look.
True. All right, Evan.
My number 1 has done immense damage to the game of Magic the Gathering.
I'm right here.
An incredible amount. Has created countless articles that write about this particular villain, that create entire conversations that last dinners long about why this villain is the way it is, how it became the way it was, how it continues to impact Magic to this very day, this actual factual day in 2019. My number one Magic the Gathering villain is the reserve list.
Yep.
The reserve list has done so much damage to Magic. It has done nothing but make us gnash teeth, get pissed off. We can't have the nice things. We have $1,000 lands or whatever because this stupid thing exists. And if it did not exist, if it was not the ever-present villain that they have mentioned multiple times is never going away, like actual never going away. Somebody in the legal department said it's not happening, therefore it's not happening. And as much as I want special super foil premium versions of Black Lotuses to show up in packs, we're never going to get it. And so that's why you're going to have $200,000 BGS 9.5 alpha versions on eBay. This is the number one villain in Magic. It's sucked. It's made things more expensive. It's made things harder. It's made things awkward. It's put them in weird legal positions. It's put lawyers in weird positions to try to explain it over and over on the internet.
Promissory estoppel.
Promissory estoppel, y'all. And there's people who say that's totally relevant, and there's people who say that's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter. It does matter. There's no fixing this villain. It just haunts us forever. That's my number one.
You're not wrong. I thought the way you were talking, I thought you were going to say the DCI. Because I thought I had that on my short list of like, if I go down the Evan route, what real life character or group would I say is pretty gnarly?
That's basically number 4. Organized play is basically DCI for what it's worth. But yeah, Ruben, am I that wrong on this one?
He's speechless for those listening at home without YouTube.
I have no words.
He shakes his head a little bit.
I will just keep this list in my back pocket. Whenever in the future anyone decides to make fun of my list,
whatever Leviathan topic shows up on the finishers,
remind them of whenever we do villains in the future, Evan Irwin is going to be on my list.
Oh boy.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our top 10 Magic the Gathering villains. You will see them on the screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, or villain, I guess we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to see all of your takes. Hit us with them.
The hottest.
Yes.
Thanks, Ruben.
Thank you. I was this heroes and villains compendium that we've put together, I think was my favorite 2 episodes we've done of this show.
Oh wow.
We had so many interesting conversations about the story of the game. We didn't even talk that much about Jace or Urza or a bunch of the major characters from throughout because they just don't fall into those neat little categories like that. And I thought that was super interesting. And yeah, tell us what you think about the villains.
Absolutely. We're going to go here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and Cardamajigs.com, presenting Cuba Majigs, and my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell, Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. Hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv @MagicMics, our Twitter @MagicMicsCast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.